Welcome to the Lifestyle Engineering Podcast. It's your host, Renat Gabitov. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, our core intention is to learn from stories of people who live purposeful lives and have badass lifestyles, which makes today's podcast guest such a phenomenal person to come on. Paul Kirchoff is an entrepreneur, community builder, and a humanitarian. Paul and I met years back on Necker Island, and we've been friends ever since. He is one of the most epic people I know, which is frankly not surprising given Paul's spirit for adventure. Paul is the founder of a company called Epics, which takes world's most epic humans, like astronauts, billionaires, and such, on world's most epic adventures. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that part of his life during the podcast. Paul was also an early employee at Dell, where he started a branch that he ended up growing from zero to $1.5 billion in sales in just 11 months. Paul built and sold a marketing software company to a Nasdaq-listed firm. Long story short, Paul is a great business mind and a phenomenal lifestyle engineer. But what I think is more impressive is the fact that Paul really cares about the world and wants to contribute to it as much as he can. As we're now going through the coronavirus pandemic, Paul started a nonprofit organization that aims to help elderly and homeless people with personal protective equipment and medical supplies. This was a massively fun conversation, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. So give it up to Paul Kirchoff.
Well, this is Paul Kirchoff. I'm the CEO of a couple of companies. One of them is Epics Worldwide, which is a pretty powerful social business network. And when I say business, we're helping each other succeed in business. But on the other hand, we're adventuring the planet, climbing the inside of the pyramids, crossing the Sahara Desert, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And the other side of it is I have two other companies. One's a software company called Domino One that crowdsources problem solving so that we can kind of solve some of the issues facing humanity ourselves, right? And the people at the bottom of the pyramid have a way to put an idea out there that can change the course of humankind. That's why I built it. And then I'm also partnered with one of the founders of Earth Day, with a impact acceleration company that's helping impact companies find funding so they can go do good stuff in the world. So that's what I'm doing today. I grew up by the Grand Canyon many years ago and have been a tech entrepreneur with a little bit of marketing in there for multiple companies and live a pretty happy life, man.
Hell yeah, man. Really excited. Welcome to this podcast. I'm really excited for this conversation. First of all, we haven't caught up for a really long while, but every time I think about you, I think about you doing something really epic. When I go to your Facebook feed, I see you flying helicopters, and doing race car driving and like all of the epic things you've done. Hence, Epics, probably like the name the name of your company.
Thanks,
and the way we met on Necker Island as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of fascinating the type of life you've built for yourself.
I appreciate it.
I'm really excited to dive into it. Maybe can you share a little bit about your upbringing, kind of where it all started?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about what people see on social media. I mean, sometimes people do it without knowing, and they're a marketing machine, and sometimes it's not authentic. I've really been blessed to be one of these people where, like, even if no one was watching, I'd be doing what I'm doing anyway. And so, just like everybody else, I mean, we all have a story that started somewhere and ended up, where you are today. But of course, no one is sitting still if you have ambition, whatever that may mean. So that this story that you've witnessed is not the story that I hope to end with, or maybe the next phase. But long story short is a lot of what has shaped me today has been, my growing up. I mean, I grew up in Arizona, very close to the Grand Canyon. But one of the unique things I think about me that wasn't always easy to deal with, but has become one of the pillars of strength that I have is, number one, my parents were very poor. But my dad got an education and made the jump to middle class. And I've been working my ass off for a long time, and so I've been able to get a little bit more comfortable than them. But the point is, like, when it comes to the value of money or the value of something, my parents did a very good job of instilling what it was like to be poor, even though I grew up middle class. And so I appreciate everything the whole way because I'm not that far from living off the soil. And the second thing is my mother is Mexican, even though I don't look like it. I got my dad's German genes. But having a little bit of a minority race in me, and knowing the stories of how their love had to overcome like deep racism, because they came out of the South, right, where there was racism against all sorts of stuff. So that kind of shaped how I view other cultures and other people. I mean, I'm a piece of all of that, And so, and then, growing up right next to the Grand Canyon, you learn to be part of nature, not just any nature, but the grandest that there is on the planet in some cases. And I also grew up in a city that was intermixed with Navajo and Hopi Indian. And the reason I give you all this background, which will come full circle when we get to the end, is because I realized that, I could easily have the complaints of anybody, but yet the strengths of everybody. And having this sensitivities to all these things is what's allowed me to, I think, do well connecting with a broad range of people, which as it turns out in life, the way you treat others comes around in your network to help you when you need it. And it's come many stories around that. So that's a little bit about my background. Went to college, got an MBA very young. I went to University of Texas here, and what's crazy is I worked really. Oh, I studied marketing and entrepreneurship in business school, and the funny thing is Texas was the top 15 school, but I ended up coming to school when I was 21, so I was super young. I'm not even sure if anybody younger has gone to school there. But what's crazy, and you would never think this, is that you're it's like being a freshman at a senior dance. You're the only one to get invited that young to be with a bunch of 30-something-year-olds that are transitioning careers, and yet when you get there, none of the recruiters would interview me, because somebody at Ford maybe, or wherever, they would show up there and they're like, well, I got 8 hours here, I might as well interview people with experience. This guy seems smart but doesn't and so I was in a brutal situation, right? You're one of the lucky people to be in a top 20 school that young, and yet nobody will give you experience because you don't have experience, and so you're stuck. And it just so happened that this woman, and maybe this is the universe's invisible hand, looking favorably upon me, but this woman that was about maybe 4 years older than me said, Paul, I know you don't feel, you're kind of down and depressed, and it's because you need experience. I don't know if I can help you, and I know you're studying marketing and you have these aspirations to be some super baller, but I can get you a job. You're going to be analyzing quality data on a spreadsheet 8 hours a day, and you're going to make like $5 an hour, right? But it's going to put some experience on your resume. And I said, I don't care what it is, man. I'll do whatever it takes to do it, right? So I go to this job, and this is a true story. The very first day, I get asked to go to an auditorium where the whole company's in this auditorium, and I'm talking to this guy, and he looks like an engineer, and I said, man, or the guy goes, what do you think about this business? And I said, man, I think that I just got here today, but I can tell you, in studying this business, I'm getting an MBA from UT. I can tell you that there's a lot of issues that this thing's going to face, but I'm happy to be here. I'm going to do my best. Anyway, I light this guy up for all these issues that the company has, and it turns out the overhead speaker gets up on the platform and goes, "All right, you guys, let's give it up for Michael Dell, your CEO." And the guy goes, do you mind if I go up and just give this speech for a second? I was like, oh my God, like I just like lit up Michael Dell on, but at the time it was very early at Dell. And so, the way the universe has it is that took me from, nobody knew who Dell was, but the point is the universe allowed me in the worst possible situation to be placed in a position of a company where I was free to dream. And so I ended up over the next 7 years having this incredible career where I had a blank sheet of paper as this company is going like this, way before Google or Apple or anybody. Dell was probably the first unicorn, and I had a blank sheet of paper to dream up entire business units and business which has since become my strength, is the blank sheet of paper. And I would go to Michael and I would say, Michael, I think we should do this. The market's going this way. I think we should go this way. He'd let me do it. And last I heard, some of those business units are worth multiple billions of dollars a year. And those businesses started on my head on the pillow at age 24, 25, architecting the entire business model on how we were going to go crush the competitors and do more for the consumers. And so that was great. And I'll pause if you want me to. Otherwise, I'm just kind of like
no,
sweeping
totally.
through this.
I'm super excited. Like, how did your relationship unravel with Michael Dell? He is obviously like one of the greatest business minds out there, and having this access to him and seeing his company grow. How did you build the relationship, and how much personal one time did you get?
Well, there's many answers to that question because part of it is, that company was in hyper growth mode, right? I mean, super fast growth. So nobody really spent tons of time with him. But I was in a group that was in charge of defining and delivering the next products that were going to be competitive with whoever our competitors were. And so, Michael was always like, when he started the thing, he was building computers, right? And so he really was kind of an engineer at heart. I mean, a little bit of a nerdy engineer. And I think anybody who likes to build products or loves technology is probably a little bit of a nerdy engineer. So I found myself in a really advantageous place because it was right within his strength. But I think I learned a lot by being part of this thing. I mean, number one, Michael, part of history will write that, he was very smart about hiring people that had skills that the company needed that were not his necessarily. And so although he may have held the CEO title for a long time, I think he was always really smart to hire sharp minds at the right time of the company's stage and turn over operations to them so that he could do what he was gifted at, Because if you ever, see Michael on stage or whatever, I mean, he's learned to be a speaker, right? I don't think naturally he was ever like some charismatic speaker, but he's learned to do that because of the success that he's had. But he was always very good at hiring other people. And I think the other thing is, there's this thing that happens in a successful business, and I know it when I see it, but it's very hard to obtain, where every single person in the company is willing to accept criticism or feedback, because if we all do it that way and nobody means any harm other than getting to the right answer, the feedback loop was the stock going through the roof. And it's very important because a lot of people who are at the bottom of certain organizations never have a chance to see the dashboard of success. Well, at Dell, if you had any kind of shares whatsoever and you're watching the stock price like literally on your other monitor while you're sitting there working, and you can see this thing going up and then it splits. Right now you have twice the amount and it's going up. It was incredible, man. I mean, every time you walked in the room to give a presentation, everybody there was a very, very sharp, aggressive shark that wanted to rip your thing apart. But you knew that in the end, we would see that stock price go up, right? And it's a very hard thing when you're a CEO. How do you get your people, to have that same intensity and drive and 24/7 work ethic? You can't force people to do that. I mean, I've learned after several companies, you have to be transparent with information that also aligns with their incentives. When they can see the dashboard and they can feel it, and they know that their actions, turn into something for them, then I think you have the situation. But I just learned a lot there, and then consequently, what was interesting is I got to the point at one point where, I know I was, the company now had tens of thousands of employees, and at one point, I won this chairman award, and I was like the number one, non-high-end executive in the whole company worldwide, and I was just killing it for them. And then I was sitting there one day, and I'm like, you know what? I've hit some major home runs for this company. I know I've got the exact DNA that Michael has. I'm going to go take this show on the road, right? I'm 29 or 30. It's time for me to break out and let this little hawk fly. And so I left. And when I left,
what was going through your head when you made the decision? When you felt like really, really comfortable to do something like Michael Dell did?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that, a lot of times if somebody, today if we meet somebody and they're working at Google and they tell you, I was like employee number 700 or whatever, you would just assume that they had made millions of dollars, right? And so, on one hand, you could easily say, it was super simple. I had made a bunch of money and I wanted to go be an entrepreneur. That wasn't the case at all. I'll tell you exactly, why I left. Because the company was growing. There were two things. The company was growing fast. And when you grow really, really fast, especially at that hyper growth mode, you better have the same discipline at hiring that got you there in the first place, right? But at some point, the company changes from this like band of just aggressive shark entrepreneurs that are inside a company together to something that needs to be managed, right? Because now you're worldwide, you're shipping millions of units. But I just noticed that the talent pool was changing, to be honest. The hiring was coming from more mature companies that were like, Motorola at the time and all these other tech companies that were just more mature. And those people, although maybe they were great managers, they didn't have the same fire in their belly that we had. And so a lot of us would get into these meetings and the pace would slow down. And when you're built to crush, you just, that can be frustrating. And the other thing, maybe tangentially, was that, you've seen this too, but the world's technology revisions and therefore wealth in companies continues to change over and over. You have computer power that was there, and then all of a sudden here comes the internet power, and then here comes the mobile power, and now here comes sharing economy, and these things just kind of go in these waves. And I could tell that at the time, again, many of the people that might be listening to this might not even been born there, but I could tell that that the internet piece was taking off, and you could start to see that investors were starting to move their money, sell Dell stock, and move it into eBay, right, or into Yahoo at the time, or whatever, when they were at the peak of their power. And I could just tell that it was changing. And the consequence of that, if you ever recognize that that's happening maybe in your company, is that it puts enormous pressure on the executives, because the executives, your stock price goes up because you're crushing sales and turning in positive results, which then gets more people to buy, which drives it up. So it's this thing. But if for some reason there's another show in town, like the internet or like Apple or like mobile, they will pull their money out. They're selling, which now you have downward pressure, which makes it even harder for the executives to they have to cut costs rather than give you the money that you need to go crush it, right? So it puts pressure on, and then all of a sudden everything freezes. And if you freeze and you're not generating the revenue, then more people will sell. And so it's a very strange thing to see the dynamics. Yeah, exactly. So at age 29 or 30, I was like, man, I've had a good run here. I've killed it, but I can tell
the culture has changed so much from the hungry entrepreneurs to a little bit more corporate. A lot of the hires probably were like the C-level from like Fortune 500 companies or something like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what your vision was when you were like really starting out, 22, 23 years old, what you wanted to make out of your life? Because I can imagine it just shifted over the years a little bit.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's, and I don't think this is abnormal, but let me just say first, when you are a young kid, and let's say you're middle class, right? Or you're poor. I remember in my, and this is like, elementary school, high school, one of those posters on the wall was a Malibu mansion with the 4-car garage, and in there was a Porsche and a Ferrari and a Lamborghini and whatever else. And that drove, like many of us, right? When you don't have anything, you want to have the things that you, are dreams. But I think that over time, it went from that to starting to see what it's like to have more money than your parents, right? Because if your parents are middle class and I'm inside a Dell killing it, you're getting rewarded with a higher salary. You're getting more stock options, right? That are growing in value. Of course, you got to earn those over time. But then you start to have financials, and you get into your 20s, but you're still in prime, like prove who you are, prove that you're special. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And so what you're doing is you're starting to earn money for the first time. In the first 6 months of my job, my full-time job at Dell, I was making more than my father was in a whole year, right? He consequently ended up passing away right before that, so I never had a chance to kind of reward him and say thank you for that. He died when I was 26. But the point is that you're trying to to drive your own proof of who you are, and you're financially driven because maybe you've never had money by yourself. It's part of getting a job and building your career. I think that by the time you get to your late 20s, you start to realize what you're capable of. You may or may not be satisfied with what you've obtained, but you're starting to be more successful. So by the time I was getting to the end of being there at Dell, one thing I want to say is I had the wisdom, which didn't feel like wisdom at the time, but it is a lot of wisdom and maybe a blessing, that I'm sitting here having a conversation, at the ranking that I was in this entire company with some executives that were basically saying, over every year, Paul, we've been giving you more and more stock options. Now, these things have a 5-year vesting period, which is very long. So they're basically doing the math for me and saying, Paul, if you just sit still for a few more years, you're going to earn this money that you've already earned, right? Let alone
that's how they get you hooked, man.
Yeah, of course, right? It's part of their retention thing. And I just remember, thinking to myself, which has come full circle in my life, thinking, like I never had that much money, right? If I sit here. So I have to make a decision between happiness, because I'm surrounded by people that are slowing me down. I feel like I'm, King Midas, where I can drop the finger down and get some gold somewhere. I've proven it here. It's more important for me. I won't miss what I haven't had. So as valuable as you guys think I am, as much money is sitting there waiting for me if I just shut up and do my job. Like, I feel like, I need to spread my wings. I'm willing to go to zero with a little bit of money in the bank, right? Because I had a job, to just see what I'm made of, right? But here's what happened. So I get out of there and I start my first company, which was a software company. I clearly had never run a software company before, but I had an idea. And I started at exactly this massive market meltdown of all tech companies, right? All these tech companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars are folding. The VC guys are stopping all investments. No big company will buy from a small company, because when money was flowing to these guys and they were using the technology from small guys, now the small guys don't have funding, so they can't fulfill the big company contracts, and so now no one's buying. So I'm sitting there like 6 months into leaving at the height of my career, to going, holy shit, what am I going to do? Because I just started my first company. I'm 30 years old. I have put a lot of my own savings into this. I have a little bit of investor money in here. And now nobody will give me the funding I need to build the software. And nobody will buy from me, even if I had the software. Like, I think I might have literally gone from the very top to the very bottom. And what was interesting is, during that time you hit a lot of ranges of emotions, and it's very easy to panic, right? Because imagine going from king of the hill to literally the complete failure, right? With not only with your money, but with other people's money. And this is a very important thing for entrepreneurs that I've learned in life, is that in hindsight, when you are younger and you're still proving who you are, you may or may not be shaped by your own, insecurities, right? This is something that you guys probably have explored on this podcast. And at that time, I certainly was. I had never done any personal development. I just was who I was. And I was very lucky to have really good parents, and I was a good person, and I was a hard-charging person. But, you look back on life, and there's all sorts of insecurities that, were built in me for random reasons. One of my biggest ones at the time was fear of not being good enough. So can you imagine, after completely demolishing fear of not being good enough, but never really doing the personal work, right? But just arriving at the top of, you're making more money than your father ever made. You're the number one employee at the darling of Wall Street, right? Just crushing it with these guys. And all of a sudden, you are back when you took a chance to the bottom of the basement, about to die, lose your savings and everything else. And the consequence of that is that other things can suffer, right? And the reason why is because your identity of who you are is tied up in how people see your success, or it's tied up in that little boy who wanted to go get the cars, right? If you don't get those cars, you're a failure. If your company that you started, regardless of what you did in previous years, fails, you're a failure, right? And you're just not good enough, just like all these times in the rest of your life. You see what I'm saying?
No, totally. And a lot of men in particular, they have exactly that fear, and I feel like it's also somewhat healthy, not maybe emotionally, but in terms of our personal growth and having that drive to want to accomplish something. Maybe it's because of insecurity, but because of insecurity, people do so many things that end up being good. So
I will say this just on the other side of that thing. I think that you're exactly right. And again, I'm going to give you more of the story later, but the reason why I have opinions on in hindsight is because I cured some of that stuff right through life, which brings you to knowing me, who you know today. But what I'm sharing with you, which I think will resonate with many people, is that it was very easy to if you have the fear of not being good enough, which most entrepreneurs have, right? You're right. That gives you that chip on the shoulder that keeps you driving and driving and driving. And in some cases, you're driving because you just want respect. You want to be known as being the best. In some cases, you're trying to achieve something financially because you never had money. It doesn't really matter what it is. But the challenge is that when difficulty hits, you can really be in trouble because you're tying your personal worth to the success of that business, right? Which is a real problem. And if difficulty hits, you can need, because of your fear of how you're perceived, you can spend so much time in that business that other things suffer, like your relationship with a significant other, your ability to be a father, right? Because your self-worth is so dedicated to that business, it can be a problem.
For some reason, this conversation reminds me of one very successful person, and that's Steve Jobs. And he had this evolution from just being a total asshole, disregarding his family, friends, and then becoming kind of a more connected person closer to the end of his years. But arguably insecurities drive the most successful people in the world to accomplish what they accomplish. And I think that's what makes life beautiful. That's the journey of having insecurities, not knowing who you are, not knowing your own worth, and how other people can appreciate you, for example, for being the person that you are. And I think having all this time, having our lifetime to explore that transition, it's essentially a challenge. And I think it's a fun game of life to be able to go through it. And I think more people like you and me, we need to bring it out so that people can see, okay, maybe my actions are driven by insecurity, because a lot of people do not even know that that's the case. That's where self-awareness comes into play.
Yeah, totally. Well, I gotta tell you that I think that much to the work that you're doing and sharing these stories, it's not something that is naturally a pursuit for humankind. I mean, let me just give you an example. On one hand, and by the way, this is the whatever I've done in life is just one story of one experience, right? That we'll share. But the most important stuff, I think, is what happened as a person through these experiences. Because listen, I mean, everybody who listens to this podcast is going to have incredible difficult times. They're going to have to overcome incredible odds. They're going to have some wins that are going to be followed immediately by some horrible losses that you have to pick yourself up and go have big wins. But the most important thing that I've found in life, which we'll dive into, is the evolution of how you view yourself. And the point that I wanted to make is that, look, if I took a snapshot of me as a kid, and maybe you're the same, because a lot of us entrepreneurs are, in class, I would get 88 percentile, right, on my tests. No matter how much I studied, I'd get 88 to 92%, which is pretty good, right? People should be happy with that, except my friends got 100. So there's a little thing unbeknownst to me that's telling me psychologically I might just not just be good enough. My parents were middle class and came from poverty. My best friends, doctors that were going to Hawaii with their families with nice cars for their kids. I didn't have that. There's another thing that might tell you you're just not quite good enough. You don't even know what's happening, right? And then all of a sudden you get into these difficult situations, which I just want to continue this quick story, is that where all of a sudden, no matter how hard you've been proving yourself that, yeah, you're good enough, even if you don't even think about it, you're really doing it. And then you hit the peak, now you're at the bottom, and here comes the difficulty of, holy shit, now, unbeknownst to you, you're being told again by the universe you're just quite not good enough because other people took their company public, and here you are struggling after and the thing is that, back to what I was saying, is that to overcome that risk and that fear, which is this negative emotion, you dive right in to solve it, right? Because we're told to solve things, but it takes so much emotional effort that other things suffer. So during that time, I was married, and I had a 1-year-old kid, and that relationship did not last. Some of it was because of the amount of effort I had to put here. I just couldn't give the effort over here, but the thing is that during the time it was absolutely brutal. In hindsight, it's the greatest gift that could have ever happened, because not only did I learn how to go against the depths of despair and overcome to survive that whole situation with no money and everything else, It made me an expert bootstrapper. My time got cut in half for the next 17 years with a son that you love. And I nailed being a dad because I only had half the time. I focused 100% of my time on half the time, which is more than I might have done if I had 100% of the time with freedom to outsource, parenting to the mother sometimes, right? So what a gift that miserable situation was. But
those constraints that they force you to evolve.
Yeah, they force you to evolve. But I will tell you this: at the time, I didn't realize the positive side of that. I was experiencing the negative side, and then because somewhere in me, I maybe still hadn't proven that I was still a good enough or a super baller. I kept going after more businesses, right? I would launch another one, and those ended up turning out pretty well. But I want to tell you that this brings us to a specific moment, all right? And I want to share this because the reason I was explaining this in this fashion is because I don't believe Steve Jobs, for example, right? Whether he was, like you said, whether he was an asshole or he didn't treat people right, the way he moved through life, I guarantee you, was because of these insecurities that were built in him between age 5 and 15, just like everybody else, right? But what happened to him is that he moved through life with enough successes or whatever to where, the problem is that he didn't realize it till he was on his deathbed, right? And he wrote about it. Out of all the stuff I've done, out of all the speeches I've given, out of all the money I have, none of it's going to take away the fact that I didn't live life in a way of appreciation and giving and all these things, right? And just to bridge that to my own story, I went through, all of these things, being a good person, like, working really hard, going up and down in successes and difficult times. But the whole time I was still this same person. I was a good person with these insecurities. Now, insecurities, whether you know what they are or not, I think most intelligent people know what their insecurities are. The problem with those is that insecurities are there because you are fearing a consequence, right? And so the problem is that you're going through life with this fear of not being good enough, let's say. Why? Because I'm afraid you might not think highly of me, right? Forget about what I think about myself. I'm worried there's a chance that you might not think I'm successful or you might not want me on this podcast. And so I continue to go through life like that until a moment happened where, again, in hindsight, I think people's happiness has like 4 dials. It's like an equalizer on a stereo system. I don't think happiness is one thing. I think it's 4. I think you can have a happiness dial whether you're in positive emotions or negative emotions on your romantic relationships. Your family is another dial. Your ambition is another dial. I mean, are you making progress towards something? And then I think there's another one, which is like, are you living an interesting life? Because you could have a great partner, a great family relationships, and be kicking ass. But if your life is monotonous, it may not be good. Anyway, the point is that I think when one of those dials goes to the bottom of negative emotions, which is hopelessness, you have this chance to ask a very important question, which is, shit, I wonder if it's me. I wonder if it's me that's causing these negative emotions on these dials. And I had a moment, and better than Steve Jobs, at least mine came literally at like age 40 or 41. I can't remember what year it was. And I remember one of those dials was hitting the bottom, and I just asked myself, man, I wonder if it's me. And then what happened is I started to learn that what was happening in my life and had been happening the entire time is that even though you were a good person, certain things would come your way. Like a person would say to me, hey, Paul, go get a taxi. And for some reason, I would hear somebody telling down to me to go do something, which triggered not being good enough.
I can resonate,
Which pushed me into a negative state of being upset, right? And I had no control over it. It just happened. But then I started to realize, which is a whole other topic, what's happening is there's these things outside that I'm consuming, and then there is some algorithm in me that when they hear this sequence of events triggers that negative emotion. What if I could transform that algorithm so that when this stuff happens, it spits out nothing or it spits out gratitude or happiness or whatever. And so when I asked this very important question, I was looking at these insecurities that I had. I was looking at the negative emotions that it was causing. And by the way, it wasn't just negative emotions with frustrations in relationships. It was negative emotions like frustration with employees, right? Or clients. I mean, this stuff is you. It's
I can definitely resonate with that a lot, especially like with employees. You're like, can't you just fucking figure this shit out? Can't you Google it? I used to get super frustrated. I even wrote an article. It's called "The Angry Manager," and it's me getting like pissed off at some of my guys. Not being like aggressive or anything, but just getting frustrated about what's happening in your company, and then I circle it back to it being my responsibility to give people all of the information to be successful, to lead them, and it's my job as a manager to figure things out. And it's literally a job of a manager to help employees to succeed. And me, when people come to me and ask me for advice, for help, I'm just like, fuck, man, can't you just figure it out? And it's like, it was literally me shying away from doing my job. So I completely kind of restructured my thinking around that particular topic. So I can definitely resonate.
Well, and here's the tricky thing. And again, this is all like wisdom in hindsight, right? Not at the time. But dude, I gotta tell you, I mean, I remember, well, and imagine you're younger than I am, which is amazing that you're aware of this stuff. When I was your age, I wasn't even aware of any of this stuff. This is all like I've learned. But the point is, it took me all the way, to age 40 or 41, where I asked, I wonder if it's me. And here's what was happening at the time, right? So one of the side effects, which you'll love, because you just said it, dude. I'm 41. At this point, I'm a weathered veteran of good times and bad, both at big companies and I've survived miracle bad news situations to have stable companies and whatever. So now I have this new company. It's growing. It seems like it's doing well, but I don't have the capital because I didn't raise capital to go hire all stars. So I have just a bunch of like young people that I'm kind of training. I got to the point, talking about being frustrated with your employees. I would go to this conference table. You can see 20 people around this. We were having some success. And it's mostly people that are like 15 years younger than me, right? Maybe not that young, but like 10 years younger than me. And I sit down, and I already know the answer of what we got to do in this meeting. And all of a sudden, there's a discussion between people that have 10 years less experience about whether or not they feel like this is the right thing to do or whatever. And I remember going into meetings and sitting down, and as soon as I saw that behavior, that discussion happening, I would just stand up, grab my stuff, tuck, kind of give my thing a little aggressive push. I just leave the meeting. I mean, I wouldn't even say goodbye, just like walk out. It was so stupid, like such negative, negative behavior from a manager. But here's the point. The point is that although somebody could tell themselves that this is your job, right? Your job is to be a good manager. You cannot do that if your interpersonal natural being doesn't know how to stop the negative reaction to that, which, by the way, again, was formed in you when you were 5 to 15 years old. You can't control it. That's why when people get in relationships or something and somebody's saying something and the other one gets triggered, the trigger doesn't happen where you're sitting there going like, I wonder if I should get angry or not. I mean, it's like, boom, it's like DNA, right? So the point is that as soon as I started to ask myself, I wonder if it's me that is causing these negative emotions when I react to these employees, or react to a significant other, I react to my son who's growing up or whatever. The answer was and always will be, it's 100% you. And so I started this journey while trying to start the next company and whatever, to figure out what is it that I control that would take this algorithm that is receiving information and has been turning out instantaneously, like sadness, anger, whatever. How do I just neutralize that? And there's a long discussion about that, which I know you've probably gone into many times about how that happens. But in the end, to me, it's about knowing what these insecurities are that are put you without your control in a negative state, and then almost doing certain things, which again, I'm not an expert on this. I just happen to have been one of the miracles. that Jason Bourne's your way into not even remembering who you were. You change the algorithm to such a degree. It's almost like telling a lie so many times, right? That the stimulus happens and it just, now it's neutral. Now you don't even feel it anymore. And what that means is that a greater percent of your time on those dials of happiness is being spent in the positive side, right? Not balanced by negative emotions. And the implications of that are far more valuable. I always tell people that the only thing more valuable than that neutralization of negative emotions, and I'm talking in business, relationships, everything, the only thing more valuable that I have seen is the health and security of your loved ones, right? That's probably the only thing I would sacrifice. There is no goddamn amount of money, no amount of fame, no amount of anything that replaces the loss of negative emotions, like structurally in your business. Because guess what that means? It means that you're only naturally, perpetually in positive emotions, which is about all you can ask for, is perpetual happiness. And so what has happened since that moment, dude, is I went from, this person that was struggling to find success, that was trying hard to get the Maserati, that was, struggling to, and not that there's not challenges, but as you know, I went from that, and by the way, having a social network that fit on two hands, to within a couple of years, having probably one of the most powerful social networks on the planet as a business. And do you know that during this time of transformation, I remember nobody had asked me to do anything. Like no friends, no family had called me on 2 or 3 weekends in a row, and I was super lonely, right? And probably depressed. And it was coming. And even though I'm trying to do this stuff, and it came to New Year's Eve, and I remember sitting there with a candle by myself. Nobody had asked me to do anything for New Year's Eve, and I wrote down on a piece of paper. I'm like, well, I might as well do some New Year's resolutions because something's got to change here, right? And I literally wrote down on that day, the exact opposite of my situation. I wrote down, start a business that makes you one of the most socially powerfully networked people on the planet.
Like that.
Right? With no plan whatsoever, right? And so since then, that became true. And I think one of the consequences of being able to erase and neutralize your insecurities is that you lose fear, right? Because there is no consequence whether you like me or not, or whether you think I'm successful or not. I mean, it doesn't, not that I don't love you, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect anything whether somebody likes me or not. So all of a sudden, without fear, everything becomes possible. So I started doing crazy stuff, like the next year, just to let you know. I sat down, things are now, the universe is kind of rewarding me, maybe for just being in a positive state all the time. And I write down these New Year's resolutions, and I write down, do something legacy level. So this is New Year's Eve. The half the year goes by, and it seems like I'm making progress on 4, but this 5th one I haven't done anything. So I decided one day, you know what I'm going to do? The world was full of racism, religious, anger, and I think we might have been in the last big election that was like Trump and Clinton, and it was dividing the country. People were so much hate in the world, and I'm like, man, I got to do. I think I know what I'm going to do. So I get on a plane, I fly to Philadelphia, I go to Independence Hall, right, with nothing but a laptop, and this is where the Constitution was written, right, for the United States. And I'm sitting there thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to sit down on the same steps where these guys signed this thing. I'm just going to rewrite the thing. Like I don't even know. I'm not even a political person.
That's so epic.
Yeah, I don't even know anything. But I kept thinking, like, somebody's got to do something. So I'll just, like, I'm a good problem solver. I'm great with a blank sheet of paper. I'm going to just write down what I think, and there'll be some balance for gun control, and some, it'll address things like, racism and stuff like this. So I go there, and the first day I walk in there, and the guy is looking at me like the security guy's like, you can't sit there. And I said, dude, let me just tell you what I'm going to try to do. Do you mind if I just sit there? I'm not going to touch anything. You'll be able to see me at all times. And he goes, okay, that's pretty cool. Go ahead and sit there. Next day, he's like, shit, man, this might be history here. I'm gonna give this guy a space. The third day, he's directing like visitors around me so that they don't bother me during, And
that's so cool.
But anyway, long story short is I finished. The next week I go to, I had this just wonderful invite.
So you rewrote the Constitution then?
Well, here's the deal. I rewrote my own version of components that weren't there, right? And I never, and the funny thing is I never did anything with it, but I want to tell you what became of it. My idea was at least I could just go get things started. If I just put a hypothesis out there, at the time I had a digital marketing agency, so certainly I know something about social networking. I'll take my ideas, I'll release it to other peers and let them weigh in on their ideas, on my ideas, right? I really didn't have a good plan. I just knew it was important to do. But it turns out the next week I had this first time invitation to the United Nations to go sit in the General Assembly where Mandela has spoken and all these amazing people. And I'm sitting there and there's this guy up on the stage, and he goes, I just want to let you guys know the United Nations has these 17 things called Strategic Development Goals, SDGs. First time I'd ever heard about it. And I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. These guys came up with 17 ideas to help the future of humankind. And here I am. Last week, I just came up with 17 ideas for the United States, right? And I kept thinking, how in the hell is anybody going to know or react to or be involved in your 17 ideas or my 17 ideas? And so at this time, the social network was but I started another company because, and this one is called Domino One. And the platform that I built over 3 years allows people to put their ideas in a central spot to save sharks, to preserve our rainforests, to reduce obesity in the world. There's another one for how do we create more female entrepreneurs. These are all challenges, just like I was solving a challenge, that once those ideas are there, it allows everybody to come in and start voting on these ideas. And so I built the platform. It's actually working today. So the way it works is, well, there's multiple ways that it works, but long story short, if you were a CEO, which I can also attest to, there's a gap between your headaches that you got to solve and everybody at the bottom of the company. There's a big gap. So if you deploy this in a business, it allows the executives to put the list of headaches in the platform and invite all employees, including the janitor, to come prioritize, solve them, and build an activation plan. And what it does at the end is it takes the people at the bottom, like the janitor that would never be heard from, and that person may have an improvement or an idea that could change the trajectory of the company. And so it measures that and rewards people. But where I started is I literally built and deployed. I found all the best ideas for saving rainforests and developed a rainforest one where people around the world are coming together and they're reacting to what they think the most important thing is to do to preserve our rainforest. But guess what? I just kicked it off. It's the ideas from the crowd that are solving what really is happening. And so that, and the fact that there were these ideas coming out of it made me realize, wow, now, on one hand, I got this powerful social network going. I got this software platform that will generate tons of ideas and empower people at the bottom of the pyramid to have power together and to start their own ideas. But I need a way to take these ideas and make them happen. And that's why I found my way, as the universe would reward you, to this guy that founded Earth Day. And he's been helping companies and ideas find capital to become real businesses for 50 years. And so I partnered up with the founder of Earth Day, and now I've got this suite of stuff, that is just truly remarkable. And I just haven't, I'm working with Martin Luther King's son, and it just does not seem to have a ceiling on the things that I'm doing. Do you know that I was recently, and this is again a kid that had had that poster of the cars on his thing from a poor family. I'm on a call the other day where I'm introducing, it's myself, it's Martin Luther King III, and it's one of the founders of Earth Day. And I'm having these legends meet each other. And it just dawned on me, maybe this is what success is like. I'm in service, and I'm surrounded by some of the greatest stories and impact people on the planet. And it's me that is connecting these two dots, right? And it has nothing to do with any amount of money. That has to do with a lifetime of being a good person, working your ass off, and then having the courage at some point to say, I wonder if it's me. Because the beforehand that I shared with you very transparently was probably 99% of the folks that I know, right? You're a good person. You're working your ass off. You have some good days and bad days. You have negative emotions, positive stuff, but you're doing your best. But the after part of going through those moments is I'm doing as epic stuff as I can. Even the incubator, the accelerator that I started with Founder Earth Day, our first couple of customers are the Pope. No kidding. We're doing the Pope's personal fund for education. It's the United Nations. We're about to do something, possibly with Jay-Z and a ton of just badass companies. And this is 6 months after launching it. And I think that had I not gone through that personal work to figure out like what is limiting me, and to do something about it, and to actually do it, and become somebody different like Jason Bourne, I don't think any of this after story would have happened. So people think that you work your ass off and you make this light jump to success. Maybe some people do that. But for me, it was actually like working hard, and then, wow, this moment came around. It, I think, took 7 months to fix yourself. And then all of a sudden, the world just goes, come on, whatever you need, you know?
I love that, and to be very honest, it seems like you were just scratching your own itch, doing what you love. You know, you went there to rewrite your version of the Constitution, not because you wanted to make a business out of it or to start that organization. You did it because you were passionate about that. That was your interest, and having your intrinsic motivation lined up, I think with the external world, with what you're doing day to day, is super important, because everything else is just a bonus. You don't need to have any validation of, like, in the real world, to still appreciate doing what you love, right? You're kind of doing it anyways. Same thing with my most successful projects, or the things I love the most. For example, lifestyle engineering, the community for personal development that I've built in this podcast. I do this because it literally gives me pleasure. I would pay to do those things, and I get to do it for free. Or in some businesses, I get to make money by doing what I love. And I really love how you tied it all back to that idea of being like more secure and tackling insecurities. And I think that draws back to self-awareness, building self-awareness. And something I've done relatively recently is I built a trigger journal. So whenever I get triggered, whenever I get pissed, I write it down. It's like, here's objectively what happened. Person X said this, and here is how it made me feel. That's it. That's all I write down. And then I try to see what are the patterns. Like, why did I feel that way? Because there's this really interesting theory of how we like process information. Essentially, there is an action, there is a belief, then there is a thought, then there's an emotion, and then there's a reaction, and then there's a result, or something like that. So there's just an external data coming at me, and based on my belief system, like, who am I, or what do I believe around the world, that's going to influence how I think about what just happened, right? When you mentioned somebody told you, hey, get a taxi, your belief might have been, that person sees me as somebody inferior to him, or whatever. So that's the belief, and then the thought is like, oh, he's an asshole, I'll not allow anybody to like treat me that way. And the emotion is anger, and then from anger, then your behavior, your action literally changes, and that influences our entire lives. So for me, I'm trying to reverse engineer. I'm just trying to see, okay, what is my reaction to whatever happened that pissed me off, and I'm trying to distill it back down to the base of the pyramid. Like, what is my belief around that area? And yeah, it's been
interesting,
a phenomenal exercise.
Do you know that? So I think you nailed exactly how it happens. And like I was saying, that the problem is that even if you knew, like, for example, let's say that situation happens, right, and you immediately are looking back at somebody and going like, God, what an asshole. But you are already in a negative emotional state, which is possibly what is bringing you down over and over and over, but certainly influencing the world around you in a negative way. The challenge, like I was saying, is that you don't control it, right? I mean, so the thing is that if you understand the triggers, here's the difficult part. The difficult part is, even if you knew what the triggers were and you start to see a pattern, every time somebody says, go get a taxi, I get really pissed off. The problem is that you still may not have any control over what happens, because there is not even a split second between that happening and something in your subconscious punching forward, like negative emotion, right? That's the challenge. But I want to tell you something that I learned, which is so valuable, man. So I remember, again, I have zero expertise in personal development other than sharing my experience. But the way I started to do this transformation is that a person just introduced me to a guy that was teaching NLP. He was a master NLP. And if anybody doesn't know what neuro-linguistics programming is, I didn't either, but I'm a fan. But I don't know whether it's the subject or it was the guy that I had helping me, because the guy I had helping me was just a New York weightlifting Olympic wrestler or something like that. I mean, the guy would not let me talk my way out of anything, right? So he's like, no, that's bullshit. You have this problem or whatever. But what he told me one time is, he said, after he learned a little bit about me, he said, man, I got some good news and bad news. He said the good news is that if we're successful at the end of this, I don't know how long it'll take, you are going to be a unbelievably transformed person in a very positive way, I can tell you. And he said the bad news is you got quite a bit going on there, right? But 90% of it is in probably 5 things. One of them, which I've shared with you today, was fear of not being good enough. But what he said to me, and this is where I wanted to hit the trigger point, is he said, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you have these patterns, whatever they are, which, by the way, if you look at that pattern of that we just discussed, chances are you can see this pattern in your life, right? Because you don't have control over it, and you never have, right? But you're just doing your best. Everybody's like that. But he said, in between now and then, you are going from pre-transformation version of you to a post-transformation. It will be night and day. The problem is you're at pre-transformation. You can't stop getting triggered. You're still getting pissed off at these younger employees. You're still having a short temper when you get home, whatever. And so he said to me 2 things that I just want to share because they're really valuable. He said, number 1, if you ever want to stem the negative reaction, right? The trigger that leads to immediate, like whatever. If you want to shorten that up so you don't carry on a grudge for the rest of the day or leave the meeting, for example, like I was, which is so stupid in hindsight. He said, as soon as something caused you to get negative, immediately thank that person. Whatever the hell you have to thank them for, you go immediately to gratitude. You immediately thank them. So he said, I don't care if you have to say, for example, in your head, thank you for wasting the last 3 minutes of my time with ridiculous comments that you're not qualified for, younger employee, because you're teaching me how to be a little bit more patient with people like you. Whatever it takes, right? No matter how stupid it sounds.
I like that.
If you go to gratitude, which is the highest positive emotion, right? I mean, the goal is to stay there all the time. But short term, just immediately thank whatever you think caused you that trigger. Thank that person, no matter what it is, in your head. Sometimes you can say it out loud if you want to, because you will. You cannot be negative. You cannot be in a negative emotion if you're thankful, right? So that was just gold, man, because it really stopped like the length of the negative emotion. And then what happened shortly thereafter is, I remember another one. He said, if you ever are upset about something, ask yourself why. Paul, why are you upset? Well, I'm upset because this person did me wrong by doing this. And he said, the second that you use the word because, right? The second you say the word because, you are actually giving your power and ability to be positive to somebody else. You're letting that person affect the fact that you're in a negative emotion, which is A, false, and B, you're giving away your power, right? Where in reality, you have the ability, your algorithm, you had the ability to take whatever they said and turn it into gratitude, right? You had a chance to turn it into gratitude. Thank you for saying that stupid shit to me and doing me wrong, right? So it's really like, I just wanted to share that because those were very important. It's easy. I think it's easy for people who are good versions of themselves, doing the best they can, going through ups and downs, that have never actually asked themselves, I wonder if it's me. It's very hard for somebody to go, well, I kind of understand, personal development and everything else. And then they see somebody who looks like they're living large, but the truth is the only reason they're living large is because they transform themselves like Jason Bourne. And I'm not exaggerating. I think that's what it takes. The problem is they don't know how to go from point A to point B, because if my feeling is that if you have those same real life natural insecurities like I did, you can't go. I'm sorry, man. I don't know anything about personal development, so I don't want to talk bad about anybody. But I find it very difficult to understand that you go somewhere and in 3 days you learn to choose happiness, right? That's not your DNA. You have to change the DNA, because if I come out there for 5 days, I'm going to be like, I'm choosing happiness. And all of a sudden somebody says, Paul, go get a taxi. I'm like, what are you talking about? Go get a taxi.
Well, your belief system hasn't changed yet, right? You can say whatever you want. You can.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And another thing that worked really well for me is just mindfulness practices, like meditating. Because when I meditate, then the gap between a trigger and my reaction really like expands, and I get to choose how to react. If there's like a second or two for me in between like that person saying something, and instead of like immediately getting angry, just sitting with that thought just for 1 second just makes a world of a difference.
That's amazing, man. I've never been heavy into meditating. I would really like to, but I will tell you that one of the other components that helped me was guided, kind of guided meditations or visualizations, because one of the things that I also found is that if it's one thing to know what your insecurities are that cause these negative emotions. Some people don't know, but I think by the time if a third party said, "Oh, now that I know you, here's what yours are," you're probably going to be like, "Yeah, I knew that already," right? So that one's the easiest one to get to. But then the second step is, how do you, like, now that you know what they are, how do you do it, right? And those two pieces, I think, are literally 5% of the game, right? The rest of the 95% to really become somebody different, so that you don't feel negative emotions anymore, which again is more powerful than anything except for this health and security of your loved ones. It's everything, man. That's the piece that you have to Jason Bourne yourself. You have to do these things like guided visualizations, visualizing whoever you're holding grudges against. Maybe your father abandoned you when you were young. Maybe you did something embarrassing against somebody, but you don't want to be that person anymore. Visualizing yourself or the other person over and over and over in forgiveness, for example, might be something that you need to do. So I found that, some version of meditation, your meditation was focus and mindfulness and creating a gap and calm. What I was doing is I was doing it on walks, so that I could perpetually, daily drill it into my head over and over and over. And I think it's just like a lie. It's like you tell yourself a lie so many times, you just suddenly, you can't even remember the truth anymore. So all of a sudden that person is forgiven for real, because you forgive them 80 million times on a walk or whatever, But it's just such a powerful thing, man, to go through that,
Well, the main idea is just observing your thoughts. A lot of the times thoughts come and we immediately jump into processing whatever thoughts we have and just observing them. It's like, okay, that's a thought. It's like, just let it go. And then, oh, that's a thought. Just let it go and let it pass. I feel like a lot of folks, they feel like, oh, I'm not a good meditator, or that's not something that I have a habit for, or that's not something I enjoy. Frankly, it's the mindful practice can be taking walks, or it can be, one of my favorites is doing nothing.
That's good. People live their entire lives without ever stopping to examine their thoughts or do nothing. I mean, it's all powerful stuff. I think the most amazing thing, I think, to examine, I think, for all of us is how, if you're lucky enough to want to pursue personal development, right, or to become better, I definitely think there's ways to become, slightly happier, slightly more aware, slightly more calm. But I think to root hardcore transform yourself to where you were a human and now you believe you are a chicken, right? And you can do everything a chicken can do. I think you have to go through the neutralization of your past, right? And obviously what I'm talking about is neutralizing the things that cause you and other people around you, by the way, negative emotions. But once you do that, wow, I mean, how life changes is just phenomenal. And I have no idea whether there's an invisible, method to the universe, or God above, or somebody rewards you with positive stuff. But I can tell you, to go from a person that had all the traits of everybody that we know that works hard and is a good person and has good times and bad times, makes mistakes, that has nothing but their friends on two hands, to what I'm doing now, is not explainable by working harder. It is not. It is because I went to war on the things in my past that gave me negative emotions. And it took me 7 months of convincing myself that I was not a human, I was a chicken. And it turns out chickens are rewarded magically in this world, right? So that is the big lesson in I don't know if it's a lesson, but that's the big, like, what's possible, I think, and the question, I think, which you're gifted at, is, how long will it take you or the people that are listening to this to go from, however old they are they going to be like you, where you're very aware of this and maybe you're in the middle of it, or maybe you've already done it, or are you going to be like Steve Jobs, that it's too late, right? You've exhausted your flame in your body on the planet, and you're just now realizing what we're talking about today.
Well, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and learn about your lifestyle. You've done so many crazy things. You have a company that focuses on epic life experiences. Something I've heard from my friends, did you rent a train and threw a party on the train? Well, is that right?
We actually never completed that one, but we, just to back up. So you're talking about epics and the part of the business model there is, you bring all these people together that have high ambition. Some of them are super achievers. I mean, we have, World Cup champions and people swimming oceans. And I'm not sure if you know this, we have guys that have skied down from the summit of Mount Everest.
Wow.
I mean, these are like super achievers. And I'd say like 30% are these kind of Indiana Jones level people. And then 70% are entrepreneurs, right? But the thing is that everybody needs access and help. And so we bring these groups together in like a new business and social network, and everybody is built to help each other open a door or teach each other stuff. So while that's going on, back to some of my story is, you can't spend your entire life with your head down focused on trying to achieve whatever goals in front of you. Otherwise, you have your pie chart looks like one color, right? And the pie chart of your life should have love and romance, and it should have adventure and everything. And so part of the reason I started this thing is because I think I was missing adventure. I mean, I was literally one of these entrepreneurs that was working 14 hours a day for a decade. And I finally woke up, and some of this ties into the story that we've shared, but I just realized, man, I really got to get out there and start living a more interesting life. And so the way this thing got started is I started doing adventures myself, right? I remember while still having a company, I was in Nicaragua in the middle of a lake. There's two volcanoes in the middle of this lake that's like the size of the Great Lakes, and one of the things is a live volcano, and you could feel it underneath your feet moving. And I had this little Nicaraguan guy in front of me that I thought we were going for a walk. It turns out he's cutting the trail up this rumbling volcano, and we were on this incline like this, and I had to tell him stop in Spanish, because I put my hands, I'll never forget this, I put my hands on a tree where the thorns went, my fingers went between the thorns, so that I could take a phone call. I did a conference call on a rumbling volcano with a guy cutting a trail, because I needed to, conduct business, right? It's not like I had a ton of money, and I was still trying to do my best in business. But I think I started doing lots of adventures like that. I mean, just incredible stuff by myself. And I started to realize, wow, a lot of these other entrepreneurs think that is like the end destination. When I'm successful, I'm going to go adventure the planet. Well, I just woke up,
that when never comes, huh?
It never comes. Well, you live that same thing, right? You're on the move all the time, doing interesting stuff while conducting business. And so I sort of have people say, hey, I would really love to go with you. And that's when I built the company. And so in the last, 2.5 years, we've climbed the inside of the Great Pyramids. We crossed the Sahara Desert. We've climbed chunks of the Himalayas and Everest. We've hung out with Mongolian nomads, like so far into rough Mongolia. These guys hunt wolves with pet eagles, right? They don't have dogs. They have giant eagles. And when they get out on their horses, which we hung out with these guys, they go out there and throw their eagle up in the air, and they're looking for that eagle to go attack a wolf so that they can make the pelts. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, some of this stuff. I can't even remember, some of this stuff, but a couple of the really cool ones that we didn't pull off for one reason or another is, one of them is we had 8 of us that were going to go to Russia, and we were going to go to one of their Air Force bases, and we were going to take these specialized high altitude MiG jet fighters to the edge of space, like into the stratosphere.
I think MiG-35s.
Yeah, so we were ready to go, and it turns out like the weekend before, I think Trump kicked out some Russian diplomats, so Putin responded by closing down everything related to Americans, and so unfortunately we couldn't go, but we had that one that we were going to do. We were going to take over our own train, but to me it's part of keeping life really exciting, and when you get a lot of hard driving people like us, it's very easy for high achievers to lose themselves in the goal of what they're trying to accomplish. And so by bringing these people together and having them help each other open doors or teach each other, their success is going faster, but the opportunity for them to attend some mind-blowing experience keeps their life interesting, but it also creates immediate bonds. I mean, the fact that we met on Necker, I mean, that's a unique experience that if you're there, you will have that shared experience forever. So it took no time at all for us to be friends and to talk business whenever we wanted, because we shared an experience. So we've been doing things like, throwing costume parties. We threw a great Gatsby party in the cave.
Oh.
And now in the South by Southwest, we throw these annual big white parties. We threw a party called Gotham in New York where we were dressed in superhero and villain outfits. I mean, but it's amazing because what I learned is that everybody who is a high achiever runs the risk of working so many hours that their network goes like this. And that's why we have a guy that's discovering Columbus's main ship, the Santa Maria, right? It's never been found. He found it. And we have race car champions and legendary cave explorers. But all of these people have given their life to a certain path, just like all of us entrepreneurs. And it turns out that they also are a company, and they need help and connections, and they need camaraderie with people that are like them, that will inspire them. And and we have astronauts, some of the most legendary astronauts. So it's just, but what you end up finding out is that everybody is just a different version of a star. But I mean, as it relates to lifestyle, I mean, to some degree, what could possibly be better than hanging out with the most inspirational people on the planet and then crushing, adventures that your mind is making up. I mean, like half the places we go, I've never once been to, right? And yet I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh, how cool would it be for us to, go deep in the Mayan jungle and hang out at one of these big stone circles where the tribesmen used to meet, and then have Mayans like dancing around us and teaching us some of their, traditional customs. And so we just make it happen.
I think what that type of adventure does to you, it removes all of the perceived barriers to like what's possible, what's not possible. Especially when you also are surrounded with astronauts and other human beings. It's like those people have done those things, and once you get to be friends with them, you realize that there are no limits. You can literally do anything that you set your mind to. And I think one way to grapple with this is just to think that. A lot of people, they think that, but they don't necessarily believe that. And I think we turn it into a belief once we experience something, once we're friends with somebody, once we see somebody do it. So doing experiences like this is fascinating.
Well, I think the other thing that you're kind of bringing up too is like, they always say there's two phrases that are used in the U.S. when the whole way you're growing up. One of them is birds of a feather flock together, right? People that are similar like to hang out with similar people. Well, you know as well as I do, when you're a CEO of a company and you're driving hard, I mean, you're on an island. Like, you can't really hang out with your employees. Other people may not inspire you because it takes so much time. So, facilitating people that are high achievers to come together and be together, they all understand, what it takes to be great at what they do. I think that's one thing. I can't even remember what the other one was. Birds of a feather flock together. Oh, and then the other one is like, the best thing you can do is surround yourself by greatness, right? I mean, how they also say, and the third one is like, you never want to be the smartest person in the room, right? Because you want to be surrounded by people who can teach you, who can open doors for you, who can give you as much as you want to give them. And I think that's part of the magic of what happens here. And those experiences, these crazy adventures that we do, is like the conduit that like bonds these relationships immediately. Because let me just tell you something. I mean, when you're hanging out with a Mongolian guy with no teeth and an eagle on his arm, and you can see the light in his eyes, that I mean, we met these folks that they had no idea what America was, never heard of the United States. They could care less, but they saw the excitement in our eyes as a human, and we saw the excitement of theirs, and that's all we needed to like, they were bringing out their traditional costumes of their tribe and asking us to put them on if we wanted pictures. I mean, it's crazy, right?
That's
and nobody can speak each other's languages. But it's life. You can't waste it.
I've been thinking in terms of like my life as a book, and a book would be a compilation of stories, right? And I can proactively go out there and create stories. And whenever I'm faced with a choice, sometimes I can work a little bit more, or I can go motorcycle around an island, or I can go surfing with somebody. And I started choosing to have experiences that will be a part of that book, because I will remember them. That experience, seeing Mongolian tribes hunt, like, it cannot not go into the book. It's so memorable, and the relationships you're gonna build, and building that richness, and making a choice to have experiences like that in your life is fascinating. Another thing to mention is that having those experiences also expands your realm of like what's possible, and I think it's extremely helpful for business as well. Once you recover well, once you take yourself out of the problem, out of the context in which you've been kind of brewing for a really long period of time. So taking those trips is probably amazing, just to be completely outside of the problem, outside of your world that you're used to, and then when you come back into it, you'll start seeing things from a very different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's the perfect thing of what everybody should experience, because what you're doing is, for sure, you're out of your comfort zone and you're experiencing something new. Sometimes it's cultures, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's nature, right? But you're experiencing something new, which delivers a little bit of excitement in your life, right? It's not monotonous. You're doing something new. You're surrounded by other super talented people, right? With time to get to know them. So you're building friendships, but if you have commonality, like you all are talking, I mean, you wouldn't imagine the amount of breakthrough business ideas we had at 15,000 feet walking in the Himalayas, right on our way up towards Everest. I mean, you're solving business problems, you're building friendships, you're in a place that you couldn't possibly imagine, and all of this stuff is bringing it back. And I just, again, being a person that has a lot of ambition, and again, in the before version of me, ambition to be successful, whatever that means, there's nothing better than checking these boxes in one shot. And in the business social network that I run, there's no requirement to travel. It's like whenever people have time and money, they can choose to go. But what is interesting is they know when they go, it's going to be a mind-blowing experience with people that will become their best friends, forever, that they would naturally look up to. And that's what's so cool about it, connecting these people that are just all-stars. And honestly, that's so, back to lifestyle stuff. We talked about a lot of like the sequence of events that kind of put me in position, and then for sure the monumental breakthrough that allowed for some of this stuff to happen. And I don't want to repeat that, but what I will tell you is, I think that in hindsight, sometimes people say, well, why don't you just start a business that you're passionate about, that you find happiness in? I think that's easier said than done, right? Because when you have to pay bills, sometimes, just stopping everything and putting yourself in risk to go start a business. I mean, a passion is not a business unless it becomes a business, right? You really have to be careful about that, and you have to pay your bills, or you'll put yourself in a situation where you'll never be able to pursue passion. But I think that if everything lines up, to have a business that forces me as a lifestyle to hang out with astronauts and World Cup champions and all this stuff, hiking the Himalayas and hanging out with Mongolian nomads, is just, I'm super grateful for it. But I also know the hard work that it took to put me in position for this. And the other side of the lifestyle too, for me, is, I started this whole conversation with you by explaining the weird mix of everybody that I am, right? Minorities, majorities, poverty, right? Some comfort in things, and nature and everything else. And I think that's why, full circle, I have also started businesses that afford me the ability to provide positive impact to the world at the grandest possible scale, right? Which has brought me relationships that are at the grandest possible scale of impact, right? I mean, having discussions with the founder of Earth Day or Martin Luther King, son, or any of these people, is not because of epics. It's actually because of all these things we've talked about. I also just decided, what is the maximum move I could make to move this planet in a positive way? And for me, it was building software that empowers everybody. But guess what? Martin Luther King's son, MLK the third, doesn't have that software to move everybody. He has to use his voice in these presentations. So they need me as much as I need them. But you also have to, back to the interpersonal thing, you have to have zero fear, right? I mean, when I was telling you, like, I don't think I ever knew what success was, because I'm always comfortable with nothing, which is, I think, one of my other secret weapons is I'm happy to have like nothing. I mean, I'm just a happy dude because of what I did. But for me, success has not been money, and it has not been the things I own. As a matter of fact, the less I have, I think the happier I am. It's actually when you see yourself on a call because you called it, and it's the Founder Earth Day and Martin Luther King's son. Like, to me, that so far that's been one of the pinnacles, because you put yourself in a position of love and warmth for the world, and skill sets, and all the hard stuff came to the point where these legends are meeting because of you, right? And the goodness that may come out of it could impact millions of people. And
there's something you
amazing.
Mentioned about New Year's Eve, I believe that it was, and you were alone in that apartment. And one of the things that you wrote down you wanted to create is you wanted to have stronger relationships in your life, and that's something I personally struggle with as well. And I started also a community just like you did, because I struggled to find people who are like me, somebody who I would connect with on a deeper level. Can you tell me about how you transitioned from having just a handful of people that were in your circle of influence to being a super connector, I know, being at the United Nations, having astronauts in your community? How do you get to meet people who you resonate with? How did your social life evolve?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, and here's the tricky thing. I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth. On one hand, we've actually already discussed the solution that is why this happened, and on the other hand, there was no guide, there was no book, there was no person, there was nothing that told me, hey, if you're sitting there and you're kind of lonely and you have 10 people as friends, how do you go from that to a worldwide network of super achievers, right? I mean, there was no, I know there's books and everything out there, and maybe they're valuable, I don't know. But for me, all of this happened, either by miracle or by the universe or whatever. But I do know what the cause was. And the cause was that I was sitting there, again, back to kind of too much focus on one thing in business, having these insecurities that were causing these negative things. I mean, when you have fear of not being good enough, you don't want to release anything you're doing too early. You may sit on it for 5 years because you don't want anybody to judge you, because you don't want anybody to think that you're not good enough, right? So the second that I went back to our conversation and cured that stuff, all of a sudden there just was no fear. So I started dreaming bigger, right? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a company that's going to just have super achievers in it around the world, and we're going to go on crazy adventures and hang out with Mongolian nomads, right? Everything became possible because guess what? There's no consequence. There's no failure. I mean, there's no destination. I don't really care if I go do it. I'm just loving the fact that I'm doing it, because I just can't feel these negative emotions anymore, right? And we discussed how to get rid of the negative emotions. It's all internal. And the same thing is, if I felt like doing something monumental, positive for the world, you can easily say, why not me? Like, why isn't it me sitting here right now? Why can't I be the one that's going to cure cancer? Why not me, right? And then you show up.
If somebody's going to do it, then why not you? In fact,
why not me? I mean, why not me, right? And but again, I would have never asked why not me. I would have never said let's go for it. I mean, who cares if it doesn't work, right? I mean, truly, who cares? Not surface. But you can't do that if you are governed by insecurities that cause the fear of some expectation. Well, I don't want to fail in business, so I got to play it careful. Well, guess what? That's because you're afraid of what happens if you fail in business. Guess what? If I fail in business, man, what a great learning experience. Holy shit, that was crazy. I did the best I could at the time with the resources I have. Nobody could have done better. It just wasn't possible. Let's go to round 2, right? Man, what a radically different view, right? But again, you can't feel that second view if you're really not that person. And many of us aren't. You have to become that person, and that's 7 months of magic that we spoke about. And And so that's the tricky part of like, how do you pursue things like, what's crazy is that now, the trickiest thing that I'm dealing with is not like, who do I need to know or what crazy idea can I go pursue? Because I feel like I'm already maxing out whatever I can dream of is actually happening, which is kind of crazy. But what is a limit is the same 24 hours you and I have, right? We have. So if I sat here and I said, what? Elon Musk is, gonna try to take some people to Mars? Fuck it, I'm gonna take us to Jupiter, right? I mean, it is highly possible that I could go just start working on Jupiter and in my lifetime maybe have the opportunity to have that plan become real for somebody. But the truth is, you are governed by the same amount of time as everybody else, right? And so how you spend that is important. So I choose to spend mine a little bit in adventure, certainly hanging out with badass people, doing unbelievable impact stuff. And instead of being enamored by anybody who may be Richard Branson, Martin Luther King, or founder Earth Day, I have realized that there's no fear if they like me or don't like me. So I'm going to call them up. I'm going to get them all on the horn, and we're going to start doing some cool stuff together, right? It's not because I've accomplished anything. It's because I just, there's no consequence of them saying
you're
no.
not attached to the outcome. It's really interesting. I've observed you say this actually many times. I figure out it's very important to know what you value in life and how you prioritize it. And some of the things that are consistent in this conversation is adventure, people, impact. Those things. So
which ironically are the three things that this business epics have become. As a matter of fact, if you had asked me, hey, tell me a little bit about the network you're bringing together, literally, and it probably says this on the website, it's the pursuit of achievement, it's the spirit of adventure, it's the power of impact, right? We're bringing anybody who loves those three things and needs help or wants to do more of any of it, they're welcome to become part of this community, and their network will grow without them even trying, And the crazy thing about this mindset thing that we're talking about in lifestyle is, guess what? If somebody doesn't want to, right? Or what do I care? Look at I'm hanging out with the most badass people doing the coolest shit on the planet. And it has nothing to do with money. Not once have you heard me, at least the new Paul, have you heard me say that money is anywhere in the vicinity of the goal. I could care less,
Well, money is a tool to do other things that you want to do, right?
Yeah, true. But what I'm saying is that I would find the same happiness surrounded by people that I admire and love, sitting there camping with nothing but a natural fire and a natural sunset, as much as I would want to go to the Grand Prix in Monaco. That costs a ton of money. I mean, it's back to the end goal, which I've found. And again, people, I would have never said this, before age 40, which. And Steve Jobs would have never said this before he actually was about to die, that the end goal is happiness. The end goal is happiness. And the funny thing about life is that, I think if you really think about this, and this is much easier to say than to do, but life is super simple, man. It's like, if it makes you happy, do more of that. If it doesn't make you happy, do less of that. And the whole goal in life, man, which you realize later in life, is that the goal is to just eliminate the time you spent in a negative emotion, stay in a positive one, and then the world just has some weird funky thing, whether it's energy or shamans or whatever. You get rewarded the more positive you are, the more helpful you are, the more loving you are. It just, like business and everything, happens much easier. And it makes sense. I mean, imagine if you went to a cocktail party and you're the one asking about everybody and you're the one offering to help everybody. When you leave, they remember you, versus the one that's trying to interrupt the conversation to say, hey, here's what I do, right? Do you think there's a way to work together? So it's like universal truths, I think,
100%. And relationships are super important to you. My question is that there is this idea behind the Dunbar number, right? The number of people that you can stay actively connected with, which is around 150 people. How do you choose? You have a really wide network. How do you choose whom to preserve a relationship with, or whom to develop a relationship with, and whom not to? Because at the end of the day, as you said, we have 24 hours in a day. How do you allocate the time? How do you know which one of those three priorities, three values to lean into more than the others?
Well, the three values that you're talking about is achievement, adventure, and impact. And I think that I'm sure everybody's pie chart may be different, or it may even have different items there. But I think what's important is that none of them are at zero, right? So they may ebb and flow. But back to your 150 people, that may be true just in terms of time. But there's some interesting other things that I've learned when I was younger. And let's say I had the opportunity to meet a billionaire, which I just didn't when I was younger. Now I know a few, but I didn't know anybody when I was younger. If I would have known somebody that I felt was valuable, and I would have met you, and you're like, hey, can you introduce me to this guy? I probably would have had heavy reservations to introduce you to them, because I know that I only have a few opportunities there, and I really need to, and I want to make it count for me, right? I mean, which everybody thinks of. Yeah. But I think that what I've found, which helps me keep in touch with many people, is that I have found a system upon which I can have a presence and give value to people. So for example, and this is like specifically epics, what I'm talking about. So for example, when we finish this thing off and you're a member of epics, you are going to find that you will hear from me personally quite often, right? Because I like you and I want you to be successful. But the truth is, I built a system so that you feel me, you hear from me, and what I'm doing constantly for you is introducing you to another person. And the whether it's through software or it's me doing it by hand, the value of me helping you and the value of me contributing you and growing your network will put me front and center, even though I may be number 149 in terms of our personal connection all the time. Like, I'll be top 5 in terms of the value to your life. And I'm not suggesting that the average person go start a social network or whatever, but the point is, I think that that's a way that I've found a way to connect and touch and watch what people are doing and to be of value in their life. I've been gifted with the tools to be able to connect you with what you need. And so now, unlike the younger version of me, there's a platform that will deliver it to you, right? It delivers opportunities to you. I just need to know what you want and what you need, and the software or myself will give it to you. And that keeps me in front of you for a long time, without any regard of, compensation.
I like that.
It's the gift of the world.
One thing I really want to ask you, do you have a bucket list?
You know what? I really don't. And I'll tell you why I think I don't have one. I think I don't have one because there's a couple of reasons. I mean, number one is I seem to be in a position not because of money, but because of lifestyle, to where, I'm inventing my own bucket list like real time, right? Like if I if we want to go like you said, like rent a train, take over our own train on the Amtrak system, put a DJ in the middle thing, and have like Burning Man on rails, right? I mean, it's all possible. So there's no need for me to look at other things to go do when I can dream and go execute that traditional bucket list, And I also think that one of the other things is that and again, this gets back to the end goal, I think, of being happiness, is that I think when you have really, in real life, taken these insecurities that drive these negative emotions and you've neutralized at least a big chunk of them, what ends up happening, in addition to being rewarded by some weird thing in the universe, you also don't have destinations anymore. Because, like, for example, like, people, I respect when people say that they are doing gratitude practice, right? But when you are happy and you're naturally appreciative of everything around you without effort, you just are gratitude, right? And again, I'm not saying I don't have some bad days every once in a while, but the point is, there's no gratitude practice, because I appreciate the bus boy, I appreciate the guy, that's sweeping that thing. I mean, I just do. There's no need to do it. So the more happy you are, I think, the more you are living a life that is present, because there is no destination. I mean, if you're happy whether you have $1 or $1 billion, then is there really a destination to try to sell your company? I mean, yeah, it's fun, right? You should be having fun growing a company, trying to sell it. If it craters, guess what? You're still having fun, right? I'm not saying you're not taking things seriously, but I mean, happiness seems to neutralize everything, and it forces a lot of these end goals of what's your bucket list, and how much money are you going to end up with, and all this stupid stuff that I used to talk about when I was young. And it just obliterates all of it so that you can just be present and be happy and just put a goal out there that's as crazy as like empower the world, right? Through solve their own problems. And then you just start going that direction, and there's no consequence.
I think the idea behind having a bucket list, for example, some items are going to take you a while to get to. If you want to run a marathon, an ultra, you name it. Maybe you want to rent maybe like a U.S. Navy ship and throw a party there. Who knows? Like certain things, they have a slightly longer timeline and a longer difficulty to it. And maybe there are a bunch of things that you want to experience in life. And I personally found it super helpful. I have some crazy items on my bucket list as well. Some of them I could do tomorrow, and many of them I could do tomorrow. They're mainly an investment of time and money. But other things, when I have a number of things, like a large number of things that I want to experience in my life, I cannot do all of them, or one after another. So it's been really helpful to have them written down, so that when I have time for adventure, when I feel like, okay, I wanna have an experience, I just go at the list. It's like, what am I the most passionate about right now? What do I want to experience the most? And just like picking one and going after it is a really cool practice. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I guess what I know I'm in a unique situation because, if I dream it, all I have to do is define it, throw it in front of some very talented friends, and if enough of us want to go, that's literally how it happens in Epics. It's like we dream up crazy stuff and we put it in front of the group, and everybody votes yes, no, yes, 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 no, and if enough of them want to go, we actually go do it. So when you do that, you a lot of the traditional bucket list you don't need to have. But you're exactly right. Do you know there's a guy in Epics who's just an amazing dude in Atlanta, and every year he puts some crazy goal out there, right, to do by the end of the year. So he'll sit there and say, like literally be completely out of shape, I'm gonna finish in the top half of an Ironman, and then he crushes at the end. And this guy's old. His guy's older than I am, right? And like last year he goes, I'm gonna enter a bodybuilding contest, right? I mean. And he goes and enters. By the end of the year, he's tanned and he's like, flexing on it. I mean, so we told him this year that in a virtual meetup, we told him, we're like, listen, man, will you take some suggestions? And so I threw out, I want him to try to make it to like the final four of a Japan sumo wrestling tournament, right? So but the beautiful thing is he starts from zero. There's a little bit of an end goal. And he just throws something as lofty as any of my stuff out there, except his is like physical stuff. And then he just goes and trains his way towards it and gets it done, So those are like bucket list items that are being invented like a year at a time for physical stuff. So, it's really cool. But, I think the benchmark for me, other than maintaining happiness, right, which I'm a hell of a lot closer to staying there than I used to be. I think for me it's impact, and impact is happening by pulling these high achievers out of their hole and watching them live life and connecting and watching other people's success happen. But it's also like, what are these gifts that I've been given, and to what degree can you be that 1 in a billion people that just shifts humanity from left to right, with whatever it is, your relationships and everything. And all those things are positive, which also fits within happiness and doing these positive things. So I don't know, it's just strange. It's like, there used to be destinations that I dreamt of, and every time I would accomplish some of these things, especially as it related to assets, or money, then you would realize, wow, it's pretty cool, and it is nice to have money to go do some stuff, but that's not nearly as powerful as being happy. It's not nearly as powerful as impacting other people's lives. And
in your business, do you have milestones if you do business because it's fun, because you appreciate it, and there's something powerful about having milestones and planning for the future? How do you take those two concepts and put together in any way?
Well, I think that having milestones and operational discipline in a business is important for many reasons, because you can impact more people the more successful you are. You can hire more talent to help you, which maximizes your 24 hours, right? So it's like, in order to get that, you can't just like show up and be happy. because it just doesn't work like that, right? I mean, you have an operational service. So I think the combination of all of the business discipline that has gone into the hard knocks you've learned, the school you've taken, and these things you've studied, everything comes into play in these businesses because you're trying to max out the ability to deliver the value that is the core values of your business, right? You're delivering this to the market, and you have to have all those disciplines. But I think the difference is that, when I was younger, I would have been driven solely by is this making money and how much money is it making and blah blah blah. And now it's much more like how intelligent and breakthrough, and regardless of whether anybody's ever done this before, how many crazy ideas can we put together that fits within business intelligence so that we can grow this thing towards delivering more impact. Now, if it's making money and somebody buys it or whatever, then great. You make that decision of whether you can now take that money and go to another thing that's on mission with your core values. But it's different than when you're looking to, when everything is being driven financially. It's different when it's driven mission centric. You're pursuing the same operational discipline, but you're not necessarily measuring your success by just the amount of money that you're making.
Well, in leadership, in my experience, when my team has a bigger goal that's really stretched out, that's like really big, then I feel like a lot of people, they are a lot more enthusiastic working on something massive. Take Elon Musk. He wants to colonize Mars. Like, this is as big as it gets, pretty much, and he's on the path, and a lot of people, they feel connected to the big cause, and they have very specific milestones. Okay, let's first get to lower or Earth orbit, then let's go to the moon, let's go to somewhere else, and then you can see the big goal being more attainable once you have the smaller goals. Like for you in particular, how do you do specific milestones for your current companies? Because some of the companies, for example, Epics, it might seem like a lifestyle company. You do it because you love it in many ways. And how do you?
There's a couple of things. Yes, it could be that, but there has been a stair step plan in place for probably 2 years. And I decided early on that I would be very, very slow growing and careful because, first of all, if you want to start a social network, you can't just walk up one day to the next person and say, do you want to join my social network? And they go, well, what's it about and who's in it? And you're going to be the first one. So there really is no, it's a very difficult thing to start one, right? And then even if you can start one, you have to build value. Otherwise, nobody will stay and pay attention. And then once you do that, you have to allow it to become its own culture. So it stands for what you. And the funny thing is, you can't dictate to these people what the culture is going to be. That's not the way it works with employees. It happens from within. But eventually, if you're patient, you now know who you are. You're delivering value to the people. People are willing to pay for that value and all the things that make a good business. And then it becomes a story of, is there value to grow, and how are you going to grow, and how, and everything that you do in any other business, what are their competitors? What are they doing? How can this upend other people? So the thing for Epics is that, I just, and I'm not even sure there's a way around this. If you're going to do this particular business, it takes a while to gather the group, to build enough features that offer value, to connect people that offers value, and allow them to bond so that they believe that this is one of their tribes, right? And when that starts to happen, now you've got a soul that you can now start to build upon, and that's kind of where this thing is. So there's definitely plans in place to start stair-stepping this thing up. There's already a ton of features that are offering people value. We're doing virtual meetups. We have our own master classes taught by the members to each other. There's things that facilitate connections. If you need help in business strategy, you click one button in a summary and you'll have 45 CEOs coming back to help you. The delivery of opportunity, back to the three things. For the pursuit of achievement, this thing is delivering opportunities. When you engage, you will get an opportunity to advance your success. For the spirit of adventure, there are opportunities to create memories, right? In a yurt in Mongolia or wherever around the world. And for impact, we're starting to build the tools to connect. If you care about rainforests and so do I, that's a common thing that's going to have a friendship, and maybe we can do something good for the planet. Let's connect these guys. So I think that all of those things kind of come together. But in order for this thing to go, dethrone or be side by side or a little brother or sister to Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or any of these other things, I mean, you have to have a discipline plan, product development plan, capital plan, right? Marketing plan. It's all the same stuff, And but I think back to the what drives you. It's like the difference is, yes, we have to do that to appease people if they're going to invest money, but on the other hand, like the amount of people's lives that are changing because they are connecting with one person that opens the door to a client that changes their business success, or the one friendship that they meet. What's the value of your best friend, right? And this is happening over and over and over. It's really cool, man. So that's one of the measurement sticks, but you have to have the business discipline to grow and to be successful.
Totally. I work with a number of people of influence, authors, creatives, YouTubers, and one of the things that they do, they're really good at thinking without barriers, and they're just kind of out there dreaming, imagining. And I found that once those types of people start looking into operations planning, they lose that ability to project their vision, and they're not really good at planning either. So one of the cool things that works business-wise really, really well is just outsourcing the planning and a lot of the execution onto somebody else, and just being in the moment.
By the way, do you know, and this is another valuable thing that happened to me in business, but it's business specific. If you ever get a chance, or anybody who's listening to your podcast, go check out the book Traction. Right? It's called Traction. The author is a guy named Gino Wickman. There's a ton of consultants that are surrounding what Traction teaches. But long story short is what Traction is it's literally a very specific operating system for running a business. Right? When do you do strategic planning, and how do you do it? How do you boil that down to quarterly plans? How do the quarterly plans boil down to the weekly plans? How do you measure people? It's all the aspects that matter in a business. But instead of, smart men or women, who are CEOs thinking that they know everything, because none of us do, what that book did for me is it let me look at that thing, and I just went, you know what? All of this makes sense. Let's adopt the whole thing. Like nobody move unless it fits within this book. And it took a little while to adopt, but once you adopt it, it is the key to success of you running a smooth company, people feeling empowered, all the things that matter in a business. Because a lot of times what happens is, as CEOs, like, we will either struggle because we think we're smart and we'll figure it out, right? Which is okay sometimes. But when you combine that plus a third-party operating system that's been proven in 5,000 companies, it's super valuable. And the reason I thought about that book is because one of the things that they mentioned is, for every 5 visionaries, right, people like the ones you were talking about that have grandiose ideas and can dream up stuff, there's one COO level operational people. The COO, they call them integrators, visionaries and integrators, but the COO level integrator people, they are 5 times as rare as visionaries. And the reason why is because they have the ability to listen to the dream and to have the love and the discipline to boil down the plan that gets there, right, all the time, like all the way down, and to run it for you. And I think some of us that have been, entrepreneurs and bootstrappers over a long period of time, for me, I have a lot of the visionary stuff, but I have a little bit of the integrator stuff because I've had to, right? I mean, these things don't build themselves, and I couldn't afford to hire anybody. But it's very interesting, because when you do get to a level of success where you can afford to hire one or the other, you have to really know who you are. Are you that visionary? Are you naturally creative, aggressive, futuristic, competitive, or are you the person that loves data, loves systematizing stuff? Because you need both to scale,
I feel like a lot of those folks, they do not get as much credit, or they're not in the spotlight. Musk has, as a part of SpaceX, he has this woman, I forgot her name, who runs operations, and who probably gives that some pushback on some of the timelines or some of the goals.
It's valuable.
It is valuable. I think for me, what I do when I work with creatives, I listen to them. and I don't like criticize their ideas, but I take kind of the best out of them, and I think, okay, like let's prioritize, let's figure out how to do it. And for us entrepreneurs, it's really important to be able to do both. And for me, what I found is when I run my creative workshops with my team, I essentially tell them, guys, let's silence our inner critic. Everything goes. Right now, it's just time to be creative, and then we'll do another session after that, and we'll just pick ideas and think about, okay, what makes the most sense, why these ideas will not work. So I just try to compartmentalize. But it's really fascinating how you mentioned that those integrators, that they're a lot less common, a lot less frequent. And in fact, I'm working on a program. It's called Operations Mastery, and essentially what it does, it introduces a framework on how to run a business from planning a vision to breaking it down to OKRs to pretty much doing the day-to-day.
That's awesome.
And
it's super cool. Do you know? When you look at and it really is valuable to read the book Traction and to really understand what it's teaching you, right? It's a whole nother thing to take that and put it in place and stick it in a company so that it runs like that. But it's very valuable when you do that. But what's interesting is we came up with our own very unique method, and it was, how do you encourage everybody to throw their ideas for like the coming quarter for goals on there, when you really need to have some structure to it. And we, I may not remember this exactly, but we did something like this. And every department of the company did this. We brought everybody on the team in the room, and we said, listen, in 1.5 hours, we're going to intelligently come up with the goals of this department for the next quarter. And we just have to keep in mind that it has to fit the goals of the company, right? And we had the goals of the company over there. But what we did is we compartmentalized the idea sessions, because in many cases there's one layer of ideas which is like, hey, this is stuff that's core to our business and providing value that's not getting done, right? And without it, we could be in trouble. So you spend a little bit of time, but people throwing up like, what's wrong, what's broken, what ideas do they have that fit that? And then you start to back off of that, and you go to like, what are the ideas that will help us, assuming nothing's broken, that will help us scale, right? How do we do more of that, better, faster, cheaper, whatever? Then there's these ideas. And then you get down to like another layer, and I'm missing one, but there's another layer that's like, what ideas do you have for industry leadership, right? What can we do? Like, assuming we get these things done. Because the reality is, to have a successful company, you have to make sure that things that are broken get fixed, or your core business is dead. You can throw all the crazy ideas of going to Jupiter on the plan, but if you can't even get to the lift, you're dead. So it's a really amazing way. And then so everybody would throw these ideas up there, and then what we would do is we would start to plot everybody's ideas. We'd plot on this 4 square grid, and the continuum was how difficult is it, how much resource and how difficult and time is it going to take, and the other one was what's it going to cost. And so when you start to throw these things, and we would color code them by the ones that were like desperate to our core business, we'd put blue. But what you end up finding is this color plot of like, wow, we really need to fix, we can, with the resource we have, we can only fix these 2 that are critical to our business. And even though there's 3 more, these are really easy. So we'll throw all 3 of those, and we'll take 2 of the long-term ones. But we can't stop inventing, because we're in the business of inventing. So we got to pick one of those big ones down low and at least make progress. And then the whole department would be like, all right, now we picked the right ones. The other ones don't go away. They get reprioritized the next quarter. When we meet again, they get thrown back up there with new ideas. And so you're perpetually like making sure that the mix of stuff that you're working on is chosen intelligently on things that you can actually accomplish. But once you choose them, then there's a project plan, the quarter with gates that you have to hit. Really
I love that your team is the one that comes up with those ideas, because once they come up with the ideas, once they're in the room, not even coming up with the ideas, once they're in the room, then they're responsible for making them happen. It's not some CEO or some C-level executives kind of like figuring out what will be cool and kind of projecting it downwards onto the teams. It's really cool that you involve the entire team, like people who are the actual soldiers, kind of listening to customers' feedback, actually like building stuff out.
That's exactly, I mean, that was the goal, was that everybody can throw ideas up there, but there's some structure in terms of what's important to the business, right? Because you never know when somebody's going to throw out like this groundbreaking idea to go to Jupiter, and yet like we got to fix the elevator or we can't even get up to the capsule. You know what I mean? And so it's a great way to focus innovation, but to, like you said, let everybody be heard, which is critical. I mean, too often there's a gap between the people at the bottom and the people at the top, which can stifle growth for sure, and resentment and everything else. So it's good, man.
Dude, it's been 2 hours. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure of a conversation.
Good, likewise, man.
Any final thoughts you have, anything you want to share, and how can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm not really sure how you find out about me, but the companies that I have, I'll just rattle these things off. So the new business and social network is epxworldwide.com. It's called Epix, but it's epxworldwide.com. And then the software that I was talking about, empowering citizens to solve their own problems, that's domino1.org. And then the one that's the accelerator where we're helping people raise money with Founder Earth Day, that's d1labs.io. So those are the three things that I've got going on. Somewhere in there, I'm probably, my background is listed on one of them. I think I might have a resume up on the D1 Labs thing. But I think the final comments for me, man, is that what we've shared about to some degree, like nobody should care about my path through life. But what is valuable is these lessons I've learned to turn a person that is probably like 99% of the folks here into this maybe 0.5% that's doing the things that I'm doing now. I just want to make sure everybody knows it wasn't because I raised money, and it wasn't because I was in the right time at the right place. It was because I had this opportunity to figure out what in myself was holding me back, and it's your insecurities that are causing these negative emotions. And if you neutralize these insecurities, that's another conversation, your life just gets set free, where everything else becomes effortless at the biggest levels you can think of. And it sounds crazy to say that because we're not really diving into what that is, but I would say, if anybody has had any negative emotions, this is outside of business, relationships, anything, ask yourself, I wonder if it's me, and then go pursue it, learning how your mind can control whether you spit out frustration, sadness, anger, because there's a way it's going to spit out gratitude. And when you start doing that over and over and over, like, man, does the world open up to you,
That's cool. Really powerful. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right, brother. I'll catch you a little bit later, all right, man?